Talking cattle now, fall rains may make a dent in the drought, but we're certainly not out of the woods yet. So we want to talk about nutrition needs for your herd when it comes to vitamin A. SUNUP's Elizabeth Hokett catches up with OSU Extension beef cattle specialist Dr. Dave Lalman.
We're here now with Dr. Dave Lalman. And Dave, we've been dealing with some drought for quite some time now, and that can have some pretty big effects on cattle. So vitamin A deficiencies are one of those effects that can have. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's becoming an issue right now.
Sure. We've talked about this before on SUNUP, especially during dry periods. And, here we are once again having a really dry fall. And the bottom line on the vitamin A issue is that it's the number one important vitamin in beef cattle nutrition. Because we get in situations like this where frequently cattle can get deficient in vitamin A, and that's important. Carotene, or beta carotene, actually is the form of vitamin A that's in the plant material, generally goes with green lush forage. So in the spring, concentration of the precursor for vitamin A in forage is abundant. As the summer goes along and the forage dries up a little bit, the concentration declines. When a hot, dry environment like we've had here the last few months, it declines rapidly and gets down near zero earlier in the year than it would. So if cattle are grazing standing forage, stockpiled forage, if they're going to be expected to graze standing forage through the winter as their primary forage source, you can bet that there's almost no vitamin A or precursor to vitamin A available. Probably some of the most prominent symptoms would be early born calves. Also stillborn calves is pretty prominent sign of that issue. And then just overall lack of immunity in the cow herd, especially in the new calves, and then scour outbreaks.
So obviously vitamin A deficiency can turn into a pretty big deal if we let that get too out of hand. So how do producers know if they have a vitamin A deficiency?
Well, first of all, I'd say they just need to work with their nutritionist to shore up vitamin A supply, supplemental vitamin A, to try to keep that from happening. But if they're starting to see some of these symptoms, if they're concerned about it, having other problems and they're not sure what the cause, they need to contact their veterinarian and have that discussion with them. But yes, most of the veterinarians have the capability of testing for vitamin A, whether it be, a liver sample, liver biopsy sample is probably the best way to do it. That's a little bit on the invasive side and a little more expensive. But they can also take a blood sample and have it sent off for analysis and get a good idea of what the vitamin A concentration is in those cattle. Once you get deficient in vitamin A, it's very difficult to climb out of that hole. And so recent publication shows that it takes nearly 3 times, you have to feed about 3 times the vitamin A requirement for about a minimum of about 70 days in order to get those animals replenished. And so as you suggest, we just don't want to let that happen in the first place, if at all possible.
So a lot of producers are already feeding hay right now. So how do they know how much vitamin A may be in that hay depending on when it was baled?
Yeah, and that is the primary determining factor, is how mature it is and how much, let's say, heat stress, sunlight, and so on it has been exposed to. Green, bright hay is going to have the carotene, the beta carotene, the precursor to vitamin A in higher concentrations. The later it was harvested, the drier the conditions, later in the season, that type of hay, a lower quality hay, is going to have lower concentrations of vitamin A. The other thing to consider, even in the bright green hay, is that the carotene concentration deteriorates over time. And so the same goes with the bag of mineral. The vitamin A supplement in that mineral gradually deteriorates over time. And so you always want to try to keep your source of vitamin A fresh if you can.
So we do have some rain in the forecast, which hopefully we get some of that. But even if we do get rain, vitamin A deficiencies are still going to be an issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the standing forage, they've already been depleted of carotene. If it's senescent forage, in other words, not growing any longer and turning brown, yeah, it's going to be low in vitamin A. Now, a rain, maybe even this time of year, will still sort of freshen things up, if you will. The other thing is if we grow some wheat pasture, and cattle have access to wheat pasture, of course, that is green, lush forage, and generally speaking, vitamin A availability, the carotene availability in that material is not going to be an issue.
Yeah. And you guys do have fact sheets on vitamin A deficiencies, right?
We do, and it lays out, the requirements for the cattle. It also gives you a table that shows you what vitamin A concentration you need to have in your supplement based on about how much mineral the cows are consuming and that kind of thing. So I think it's very helpful.
All right, Dave, thanks for the information, and we'll all be hoping and praying for some of that rain.
We certainly will.
And for those fact sheets that he was talking about, just go to the SUNUP website.